2. The Sith Empire of Sila's youth was a nest of star systems linked by common heritage, ambition, and greed. It was also, in a sense, a black hole from which little escaped. The Stygian caldera's limiting effects on hyperspace travel were disproportionate, making it far easier for unlucky outsiders to wander into Sith space than for the Sith Lords to venture out. Those who found their way in seldom returned, becoming slaves to one princeling or another. The arrivals frequently changed hands over the generations, forgetting their homes completely. They too were of the Sith now. Some Sith Lords, such as Naga Sadow, saw value in the work of the human descendants of the original Tapani refugees, where their tentacle-faced masters, with lineages back to the Sith species, were more interested in sorceries. Sila's people excelled at science. When allowed to practice, they did, forming the industrial and medical infrastructures for several lords. Some even resolved problems of lightsaber crystal fabrication and power generation that had eluded the Jedi of the Republic. Such feats were never heralded. No Sith Lord would share a new weapon. If failure was an orphan, success, for the Sith, was a secret love child. The child Sila had her own successes, serving on Relg with the rest of her family in the forces of Ludo Kresh, Sadow's greatest rival. At 13, Sila was already a talented healer, drawing both on the Force and the medical knowledge of her forebears. Devotion had already borne fruit. "We are advancing in this movement," her father had said. "You have done well, and it has been rewarded. Glory in the honor, Sila. It is the greatest that can befall such as us." She had been charged with the care of Lord Kresh's feet. They were out all afternoon again, the two of them, Corson and the Keshari woman. Tilden had told Sila that, and she had other confidants who provided regular reports. Her husband and his so-called ambassador, Adari, would stroll the pathways painstakingly carved out of the once treacherous mountainside, discussing what? Not a blasted lot, as far as Sila could tell. Adari's walks with Corson dated from the beginning of Sila's own relationship with him. Back then there had been a need. The Vol woman had discovered the Sith on the mountain, and had acted as intermediary with the Keshari. But as years progressed and the need for a single ambassador ebbed, the walks continued, ranging ever farther away. After the birth of Sila and Corson's daughter, Nida, his walks with Adari had become daily, including the occasional Uvok flight. Sila knew enough from her sources not to suspect infidelity, as if she would care. But the native woman had taken steps to improve her plain appearance. Adari had recently begun turning up in Vorshandi face markings, a decoration unheard of for a Keshari widow of an Uvok rider. But eavesdroppers confirmed for Sila that the generally mindless substance of their discussions hadn't changed. "Where does the sun go at night, Corson? Is air part of the Force, Corson? Why are rocks not food, Corson? If she was a spy, she was pretty useless at it, but she did have command of a huge chunk of the Grand Lord's time, and more. She's really something, isn't she?" he had asked in an unguarded moment after Adari flew back to Tav one evening. "I think your standards for playthings have plummeted," Sila had responded. "Along with my ship, and my real husband," she had not said. Sila thought back on that moment now, as she stood outside the ward. 15 years with her beloved husband's hated brother. 15 years with the man who had probably orphaned her son. Let the old purple wraith have him, she thought. The less seen of Yaru Corson, the better. Corson's seduction of Sila had not taken long at all. Once she'd convinced him he'd be met with something other than a dagger. It was an acceptable arrangement on both sides. By winning her approval, the commander had solidified his bonds with the restive miners his ship was carrying, and stripped away something that had belonged to his hated sibling. She even let him think it was his idea, though she bit her lip to ribbons that first year. For her part, Sila won power and influence in the new order, benefits going far beyond convenient morning ablutions. Little Jariad would be raised in the best lodgings wherever they were, first in the walled native city of Tav, later in the mountain compound, and she had a job. Administration of the Sith sick ward seemed like a worthless sinecure, given the rude health of the Keshiri pampered people. Certainly no one else wanted the assignment, not with a world to conquer and an interstellar escape to engineer. Most Sith injured in disagreements never reached a healer anyway. But Sela got to know more about the Sith who were stranded on Kesh than anyone, including the Omen officer originally responsible for keeping the ranks. She knew who was born and when and to whom, and that was the balance of power. The others weren't even looking. Their eyes were still on the sky, on getting out. Only Corson seemed to understand that they might be settling into a permanent situation, though he clearly worked to prevent anyone but Sela from sensing it. She didn't understand why he had been open with her about it. Perhaps the wife of Yaru Corson didn't merit hope. No matter, she didn't need it anyway. She saw the future, here in the assembly yard behind the ward, as she walked through on her periodic reviews. Here, the youth of the Sith reported to see her, or rather, to be seen. This is Ebia Tadel, daughter of the miner Nafjan and the bridge cadet Kanika. Sela's willowy aide, Orlinda, stood behind a stern-faced pink child and read from a parchment. 8 years old next month by our counting. No ailments. Sela's hand closed in a V around the young girl's chin. Sela looked left and right, inspecting the child like livestock. High cheekbones, she said, mashing her index finger against the youngling's face. I know your parents, girl. Are you a source of despair to them? No, Lady Sela. This is good. And what is your duty? To be like you, milady. Not the answer I had in mind, but I won't argue, Sela said, releasing the child and turning to Orenda, her aide. I don't see any flaring of the skull, but I'm concerned about her coloring, she said. Too florid. Check the genealogy again. She might yet have a family if we choose properly. With a pat on the rear from Orenda. 8-year-old Ebia Tidel returned to play in the outer yard, momentarily safe in the knowledge that her life might not be a genetic dead end. It was an important matter, Sela thought as she watched the younglings duel with hedge arbo staffs. Every child there had been born since the crash landing. Apart from the infusion of youth to the Sith population, it appeared that very little had changed. Every color from humanity's spectrum had been represented in the original Omen crew, and that continued to be the case. None of the casual pairings with Kashiri had produced any offspring whatsoever. Sela thanked the dark side for that. And of course, there was the problem with Ravelin's people. The number of relatively pure-blooded humans had been steadily increasing. So had the purity of that blood. She had seen to that, with Corson's full approval. It was sensible. Kesh had killed the Masasi. If it had not killed humans yet, then the Sith needed more humans. Adapt or die, Corson had said. There were several more younglings on the list for this week, Orenda said. Did you want to see them today, Sela? I'm not in the mood. Is there anything else? Orenda rolled up her parchment and shooed the remaining children to the exercise yard. Well, she said, we'll need a new Kashiri bearer for the wardroom. What happened to the last one, Orenda? Sela smirked. Did you finally kill him with your kindnesses? No, but he is dead. The big one, Gosam? Gor M, Orenda said with a sigh. Yes, he died last week. We'd loaned him to Ravelin's team breaking down one of the decks of Omen, looking for whatever it is they look for to use. Gorum was well, you remember. So stronging. Get to it. I guess he'd been moving heavy plates, and it's hot up there under that roof. He keeled over right outside the ship. Orenda clicked her tongue. She'd thought the Kashiri were made of stronger stuff. Still, it was a good chance to rib her lusty friend. I imagine you wept at the funeral pyre? No, they tossed him over the cliff, Orenda said, straightening her flaxen hair. It was that day with the high winds. Just before dusk, Sela found Corson again on the plaza. His Kashiri plaything was gone, and Corson was looking at himself. Or rather, at a pretty bad replica. Crafters from Tav had just delivered a 4-meter-tall not-very likeness of their savior, sculpted from an enormous slab of glass. It's a first pass, Corson said, sensing her arrival. Clearly. Sela thought it would befoul the killing fields of Ashas-Ri, but her Kashiri aide thought it was marvelous. At a minimum, it's positively stupendous, milady, Tilden said. Something truly worthy of the Skyborn, I mean, the Protectors. He corrected himself quickly in the presence of the Grand Lord, but still seemed to swallow hard at the new word, so recently added to the religion of his birth. Ravelin's cousin, the cyborg Hestus, had worked for years with other linguists from the Omen to plumb the oral histories of the Keshiri. They'd sought any hint that anyone had ever happened by, anyone who might return to Kesh again, to provide them escape. They hadn't found much. The Neshtavar, the Uvak riders who until recently had ruled the planet, had layered their religion of the Skyborn and the opposing Other side over earlier tales of protectors and destructors. The destructors periodically returned to rain disaster upon Kesh. The protectors were destined to stop them, once and for all. Corson, now at the focus of the Keshiri faith, had claimed a moment of revelation and decreed a return to the old names. That, like much else over the years, had been Seela's idea. The Neshtavar had considered themselves the sons of the Skyborn, but no living Keshiri could claim kinship to the distant protectors. Whatever status any native previously enjoyed was gone, and now, Seela saw, the Keshiri were showing their respect with bug-eyed slabs of glass. They'd better learn to get our faces right before they respect me, Seela thought. It's not that it looks bad, she said, once Tilden had stepped away. It's that it doesn't look right, her. Thinking again of moving us from the mountain? Corson smiled, wind-cracked wrinkles darkening in the shadows. I think we wore out the Keshiri's patience when we stayed in Tav the first time. And what difference does that make? None. He grabbed her hand, surprising her. Listen, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the work you've been doing at the ward. It's everything I hoped, everything I knew you were capable of. Oh, I don't think you know what I'm capable of. Corson looked away and laughed. Well, let's not pursue that. Would dinner interest you instead? His eyes shone. Seela recognized the look. The man was capable, as ever, of keeping multiple sets of accounts. Before she could answer, a shout came from above. Corson and Seela looked to the watchtower. No attacker threatened. The Sith had purged the range of predators years before. Instead, sentries simply sat in meditation, listening to the F-Orse for messages from Sith, traveling in the far-flung reaches of the land. It's Ravelin, called down a young red-faced sentry. Only a child when Omen crashed. Something has happened in Tetsubal. Something bad. Corson looked up in aggravation. He could feel something in the Force, too. Something chaotic. But he had no idea what. This was exactly why they shouldn't have pirated their personal communicators in an earlier escape scheme. Seela looked up at the tower and mouthed, Is Ravelin dying? No, the herald said, barely catching her words. Everyone else is.